connecting to the YouTube. Got me? There we are. We're live. We're up. Nice. All right. Here we go. What's up, everybody? Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am going to do a quick audio check here just to make sure. Keegan is awesome. Keegan is awesome. All right, there we go. Excellent. It's always my test because you are awesome. Welcome back to a live stream. We are diving in right here. This is episode number 2. We're going to talk about the hip and glutes, your butte. We're going to get into all that. And a couple of our sponsors that we want to say thank you to really quick. Brightsidestyle.com. Check out Brightside. They have their beard oil, their beard wax, and their salt and clay surf spray. That's probably my favorite part. It has really helped form my beard into a much more formidable lying production of hair that hangs and dangles off of my face, and it smells delightful as well. So check them out, our friends over at brightsidestyle.com. And I talked to Bedros and asked him if it would be okay, because I absolutely love his shirts, if we could talk about Fuel Hunt. And so go over to fuelhunt.com and check out their shirts, shorts, all their great, they got great jiu-jitsu stuff and all kinds of cool things. So check out their gear over there. I think you will be pleasantly surprised. Very high quality products, and those have been my favorite parts of wearing a lot of his gear. We are going to dive in right here. This is the official first Monday of the month, even though this is episode number 2. We started at the end, kind of a bonus week last month, so we're going to dive in. Next Monday, we will be coming to you live at TOA Select members inside Select. So we'll be doing the same thing, but it'll be protected inside our membership. So if you don't want to miss one, become a member. Hop over there, join in, and you will get to see. We're going to go pretty deep, almost 90 minutes on that one, about 60, 65 minutes of content. And then we will be getting into the Q&As, and I have a client who, all that kind of stuff that we get from many of our members. So happy to have you join us over there. This is the syllabus for the mini course that we are kind of working our way through right now. And today we're going to talk about the hips and the butt. And as always, we will discuss the breakdown of the anatomy, showcase some issues, look at some research, and then we'll teach you how to apply answers in practice in the application. So we're going to start off here by bulletproofing the aging body. A little bit of research here with me on the hips. This is a posterior view, breakdown of the anatomy. There are musculatures that we discussed last week with the lower back, the QL in particular, that does have a lot to play with the health quality of your hips. So I kind of keep that in mind, knowing that you have to have a strong QL and a strong back to assist you in helping bulletproof your hips. But specifically looking at this, pun intended, but the piriformis, the gemellus muscles, and the gluteus muscles, try to say them all at once, your gluteus maximus, your medius, and your minimus. And the gemellus muscles, there are 5 to 6 of these muscles. They're very, very small. And if you have a hip replacement, they actually cut those away. You don't have them anymore. Everything else they keep. But they're very small musculatures. And I say 5 to 6 because some people have 5 and some people have 6. They're very small musculatures that assist in helping keep the femoral head inside the acetabular socket of the hip. The piriformis, as you can see in the image there, that's this guy right here. If you can see my mouse arrow there, is a external rotator on the hip and also a stabilizer there as well. And then your glutes, if you were to simply reach back and grab your butt, take a full handful, that's pretty much all gluteus maximus. And that glute max's primary job is extension of the hip and slight external rotation of the hip. And then when you get into the medius and the minimus, their jobs are kind of the opposite. They assist in extension, but their big focuses are external rotation. And they are targeting in a way that if you look up at me real quick, when your glutes or your max is really well developed, your hips kind of curve in and they're like these two pockets on the sides of your hips that won't get developed very well if you don't address them with some of the exercises we're going to show you, number one, but really by adding a band when you squat, when you bridge, when you do lateral walks, all that kind of stuff, you really target these two extra gluteal muscles, the medius and the minimus, and they kind of fill in that gap. So you get a nice round tush that is really supportive all the way around the hip rather than a strong glute max in the back, and the side of the hip actually has little indentations because it's underdeveloped. And that's where you can have a failure of mechanics that end up hurting your hip more than helping it. I did not really train my glutes as a targeted muscle group ever. I just kind of lumped it in with my leg work and my quads and my hamstring work. And now we do give an extra emphasis on a forward leaning split squat versus a regular leaning split squat, a forward leaning step up, and we'll put in glute, bridge variations and whatnot to assist us in getting some type of glute work almost in every workout, if not a couple of times a week. And then we're going to showcase here the issues glute strains, tears, and contusions can occur, but they're pretty durable. The hamstrings are much more vulnerable to strains and tears. The glutes, it's pretty difficult to tear or strain a glute. The range of motion is rather controlled. They're really dense. They're real thick musculature, so they are harder to hurt. But when you do hurt them, they are going to hurt for a while because they're postural, meaning that if you tear a bicep, you can kind of sling your arm to your body and not really utilize it and allow it to heal. But if you strain a glute or a hamstring, the reason they take so long is because you still have to walk around through life. You can't just sit there. And so because you're continuing to use it over and over and over again, it's really difficult to have it heal up. And so those posterior muscular strains, tears, and or contusions can be nagging, and they can take a long time to heal up. Your piriformis syndrome and your IT band syndromes, basically the syndromes are itis issues. They're overuse itises, and you start to develop pain and discomfort in these musculatures. And again, as you continue to use them too much, they'll aggravate. When you don't aggravate them, they'll start to heal up. But they can strain and re-aggravate easily. From the simplicities of hinging over to pick up your car keys, if you drop them, you can re-aggravate. And more or less, for a better example, it's like getting a cut on your knuckle. If you keep your finger straight, the scab will occur and it'll start to heal. And 7 to 10 days, the scar's almost gone and the scab's gone. But every day you cut your finger, scab starts to form, and then you flex your finger and it tears open again. And the next day, new one, and then you flex it and it tears open. Kind of what we're doing here. Every time you stand up, you walk around, you lunge, you hinge, you squat, you're basically kind of tearing the scab off. And you've got to more or less start over. If not start over, you're 5% advancing rather than 20 or 30% advancing with each passing day. So it can be rather slow. Looking at the hip from the front, the anterior view, you'll see that iliacus and the psoas, the iliopsoas muscle, that same one we kind of talked about a little bit last week. This angle is a little better, this picture is a little better, as you can see how they originate, the iliacus off the ilium and on the inside of the pelvis there, and then the psoas muscle coming from the higher ups there in your, in your vertebrae 3, 4, 5, working the way down, and how they kind of join up. They go through that little frame and that little hole in the front of your hip, and they insert right at the top medial aspect of the femoral head. And then you're going to work your way down here a little bit into the adductors. The pectineus is a very small, little tiny muscle. Look at the picture there on the right. You'll see it, pectineus. And it's an adductor, it pulls in, and there's slight internal rotation with it. And then you have adductor magnus. Look over on the left, you'll see that one start to ascend across and bold there. And then you'll see brevis kind of descends down from that. And then you'll see longus goes right over the top of that one. Then you'll see the gracilis goes over the top of that. And then you have the sartorius that's not featured, but is going to cross over that whole thing. All of these are adductors. The sartorius is a hip flexor and external rotator, but because of its angle of pull, when you adduct, it does activate and does give you some additional force there. So we have a lot of musculature going around the hip. You've got the hip flexors from descending above. Think of it like a puppet. The strings from the top of your spine going through your hip, pulling on the front of the hip. You have your adductors that are going to pull in. You have your abductors, your glutes, glute medius, minimus, maximus on the other side, that are then pulling out and or back. And then you're going to add the hip flexors, your quadriceps, everything over the top of that. You're basically surrounding this hip with a ton of muscle. And I would say none of them are responsible for just one thing. They all are kind of multifaceted. And that's where they all work really well together to produce circumduction at the hip and or any other locomotive movement that you are trying to produce. Your general locomotion is just movement of the hip, typically referenced in terms of walking locomotion as you move around, but really just any movement in general, kind of classified as that. You are going to have hip flexor strains, tears, and contusions here as well. And very similar to the ones on the backside of the body, these ones are going to hang around for a while because they're on just as much as the front. If you were ascending and descending stairs and getting up and down off the floor and getting in and out of bed and all that, there's just more opportunity to aggravate those as we go. There's something quite awful called snapping hip syndrome. That's rough. That's where the tendon of one of the musculatures in the hip is so swollen it cannot stay in its grooved path. So as you move, it pops in and out and snaps back and forth. It's quite painful. And then you have bursitis, labral tears, and hip impingements, all other issues in there. The best way to describe a bursa and a bursitis is a deflated balloon. If you envision, let's take your ankle, for example, because everybody's probably sprained their ankle, and you roll your ankle over, and then if you were to roll it and then just stop and stare at it and just watched it, what you would see is your ankle would slowly, over a couple of minutes, start to swell and swell and swell. And eventually, the calcaneus and the talus, like all the different bones that you can kind of see in your ankle, all basically kind of go away because the swelling fills up all the gap. What's swelling? What is happening in that? Those are the bursa sacs in between each joint. Pretty much every joint in the body, from one joint to the next, has a little tiny deflated balloon. Not for reals, I'm just using this as an analogy. Basically, it's a little tiny sac in there, and it's deflated, and its job is defense. Its job is, it's an airbag for once it's in the car accident. So you roll your ankle, there's the car accident, it deploys, and it starts to swell up, and its job is to kind of lock in that joint and not let it move around, because what you just did really caused a lot of damage. And so the swelling goes, hey, lock this thing down. We don't want that to happen again. Let's swell it up, let's lock it in, and then let's start to allow the healing process to begin. And so that's where putting compression around your ankle, utilizing and continuing to work it and plantar dorsiflex, move around. That's why you see basketball players roll their ankle, they tape it, they give it compression, and they send them back out on the court, go run. And they want them to move because that pumps all that blood and all the bursitis of the inflammation in there starts to move it around, and the swelling isn't as bad. The ligaments that you just strained are strained. I'm not saying nothing happened. Like, you definitely hurt yourself, but that's going to happen pretty much anywhere. So you have one of these in your hip, you have one in your knee, you have one in between each of your vertebrae, you have one in between every finger you have, every joint of your finger. They're all over the place. So if you get a bursitis in your hip, it can be quite painful because that area is now swollen, and it's really difficult not to aggravate it because it moves in so many different angles. Even when you're like, I got to kind of protect this and not move around a whole lot, just shifting out of bed, you're getting through all three planes of motion. Just moving over to the edge of the bed, sitting up and getting up. So it's quite easy to continue to aggravate these things. Labral tears, your labrum is basically a lasso. Okay, envision a lasso, lassoed around the femoral head and then pulled into the socket. And that rope, that lassoed rope, is now holding it into that socket. And as you continue to move and your bones become a little more porous and you get a little bit of arthritis, it starts to rub, and eventually that labrum starts to get kind of frayed. And then eventually it tears, and then eventually it's completely worn down into nothing and really doesn't even exist anymore. Your body's kind of absorbed all the chunks and the pieces and just mushed it all around in the joint. And so in some cases you might go in there and go, oh, let's go look for this labral tear. And then they get in there and there's no labrum to be found. Both of my hips were like that. Neither of my hips could they find any particles of my labrum other than just damaged chunks of it hanging on both origin and insertion side. Everything else was gone. completely eroded, cheese grated away, if you will. So labral tears, if found early, can be fixed. I had a buddy of mine I worked with, tore both of his labrums trying to do a sumo deadlift that was too heavy for him, and ended up having, what are they called? I'm blanking. No. What Adam had. I had him first, and then it'll come to me. It'll come to me. Anyway, surgery where they go in there, arthroscopies, thank you. Arthroscopy, they go in there and they try to either burn it back together or stitch it back together, and then you allow it to heal by not moving around much other than in the sagittal plane. And that slowly starts to heal up, and then they're like, just do normal life. Don't try to sumo deadlift 300 pounds anymore, and you're good. That, or you need a hip replacement at some point, because that's when things are really going to get bad. So we got to take care of our hips. The stronger your back is, the healthier your hips will be. But in return, the healthier your hips are, the stronger your back and the healthier your back will be. And so they really work well together. That's why we did these as part 1, part 2, if you will, for chapter 1, chapter 2, episode 1, episode 2, where they really kind of work well together. Do you have some? No? Okay. All right, so moving on here into the research a little bit. Looking at the hips and the glutes, there's a pretty cool research component here. A look at the effects of resistance training on pain, on strength, and on function in osteoarthritic individuals. This was a systematic review and a meta-analysis, meaning they used multiple studies. So you have 27 studies, 1,712 subjects. That's a lot of people. In 45% of them, just by doing simple resistance training, they had reductions in their overall pain. 47% had increases in overall strength in their hips. However, there were no significant changes found in function. So one thing that resistance training will show us is that pain reduction can occur by simply producing better strength gains and stability inside the joint. And then by increasing the strength and the stability by the joint, not only does your pain reduction go down, but your potential for further injury reduces because you are now stronger. So these two go hand in hand. Why did function not change? Because they did not test for function. They did not attempt to improve function. They simply tried to improve strength and reduce pain, and then looked to see if function was to be improved. Functionality meaning that the lifts that they did and the ranges that they trained did not get better or worse necessarily. It's not like they could squat deeper or they could lunge further, further out, etc. So they didn't really go into this with the intention of trying to increase function. And I think that's where another study, and most of these meta-analysis, part of the final findings are almost always the same sentence. More research needs to be done to find blank, right? And so I think that is the next one is, if you looked at another group of subjects like this and said, can we reduce pain? Yes. Can we increase strength? Yes. Can we increase functionality? Well, what are we going to do specifically to try to do that? Does that include, 1 or 2 yoga classes a week for range of motion or Tai Chi, or these 6 specific stretches that need to be done over and over again? Or does it mean we need to measure everybody's range of motion for their strength and then measure it afterwards and see, did they get stronger? Did they increase their range of motion, etc.? I think that ultimately you will, in most cases, see an increase in flexibility, but not necessarily function. And that's where definitions start to kind of come in here. And again, I don't know exactly what they used to define function in this research study. However, there was no significant change found. All right, as we look into bulletproofing the aging body, and we have an understanding that by getting stronger, we're going to reduce our risk of injury, we're going to reduce our pain, what exercises do we really want to target to make sure that we're increasing that strength and reducing the pain receptions, and hopefully increasing range of motion, which by my definition now we've increased function. Quick side note, if I take you onto the floor and we measure your hamstring sit and reach, we measure it, let's say it's 6 inches past your toes, okay, which would be very impressive, but let's say that's it. And then we turn on the heater in here and I heat it up to 105 degrees. and we do all these yoga moves, and then we sit you down and we test it again, and you're 10 inches past your toes. And it's like, holy cow, I increased my flexibility by 4 inches. If we let you get up, leave this room, go on about your day, everything goes back to room temperature, normal temperature, and 5-6 hours later, we bring you back and we sit you down, how far are you going to sit and reach? 6 inches on average is where people go right back to where they were before. So any musculature that is really warmed and put through a range of motion will typically increase, just like warming up a rubber band or warming up an elastic band. It will expand and give better pliability because it's warm. But once it's cooled back to regular temperature, it's no more pliable or more flexible than usual, okay? Where increased range of motion occurs, improved flexibility, is when you do that same thing, either via warming up in regular temperatures, like warm up body, let's go exercise now, or in temperatures, high temperatures like a hot yoga class, and then add load to the range of motion. Now the fibers are stressed under the tension of that load, and they are establishing new lengthened patterns. So you're literally taking the actin and myosin heads and starting to stretch them apart because there's more external load to push you into those deeper ranges of motion. That's why when you look at bodybuilders, really accomplished good bodybuilders, typically their range of motion and quote unquote flexibility in their squats and their deadlifts and their overhead pressing are all really impressive. They just have so much bulk, and the bulk is so stiff that it makes them look really bulky and stocky and inflexible. But in many cases, Arnold, Flex, Dexter Jackson, Ronnie Coleman, these guys could do the splits and flex at the same time. They were great posers. What's Kai's last name? Why am I blanking on that? Kai Jackson? No, that's Kai. Give it to me, babe. Green? Kai Green, thank you. Kai Green is probably, oh man, I want to be careful with this because Frank Zane was pretty amazing too. So was Tom. I would say Kai Green is probably the most flexible and most entertaining poser we've ever seen. Extremely flexible, this guy, but super bulky. So it doesn't mean that because you're building more muscle mass, you're going to become less pliable, less flexible. It's actually quite the opposite. If you continue to increase range of motion, but then practice that flexibility through ranges when you're not under load, that's how you'll maintain it. So when we show you these things, let's say Keegan can hinge on her kickstands to parallel, and she can do that every single day. But then we give her a weight, and that weight starts to warm up, the muscles start to warm up, and the weight starts to pull her into deeper ranges, and she can now go like 2 inches lower. By her continuing to do that over and over and over again, and then working on flexibility through dynamic mobilities and regular flexibility training on every other day, she will now establish that 2 inch deeper pattern as her new range of motion. But the external load needs to be there. There's a guy named Dean Somerset. If you'll put in the notes to put a link to one of his research articles, there are many, but he has one that really wraps this whole thing up and shows how range of motion is not increased through regular static stretching, through ballistic stretching for sure, and through temperatured changing flexibility, that it needs to be done under load. And that's how people truly improve their flexibility. It's either that or you practice so much that your musculature doesn't have a chance to return to normal, meaning you're doing flexibility training all day long. Yes, the fibers will start to stretch, but they never have the opportunity to return to whatever their normal length is, making you a very unstrong, unpowerful person. You're like Gumby all the time now. Everything's just constantly being stretched or trying to come back together. You don't really get a lot of power production out of that. I had a guy in college that was a pretty decent long jumper, high jumper, but constantly worked on his flexibility. Every time we sat down, he'd start stretching. And I think it hurt him. He was so hyper pliable. He didn't have any spring to his step. Where Florida State in the 90s, they would recruit like 20 top tier sprinters. And knowing that like 5 or 6 of them were going to tear their hamstrings, they didn't care. They did dynamic ballistic lifting and stretching all year long. So these guys were hyper flexible, hyper ballistic. I mean, they didn't worry about flexibility. They just said, I want those muscle fibers to turn over quicker. Would they get injured higher? Absolutely. They led the whole country in injury rates, but they always had the fastest sprinters because they did this dynamic, explosive, ballistic style of flexibility and resistance training, but it was very risky. So there's like, we'll put more money into getting more people and know that we're going to lose some. We're still going to have a bunch of badasses behind them that we can fill in that are still better than most people out there. So there's something to be said for power and flexibility and strength. All three of these pieces need to be trained. And this is one of the lifts that we think is pretty beneficial for you to practice that on. A traditional kickstand, notice Keegan's knees, number one, how they're stacked and aligned. Kickstands are often done in like a short split stance, like a lunge, where the knee would then drift back a little bit further. You want your knees right next to each other. You just want one foot propped way up on the toe, as you see her back foot here. What that's doing is shortening the stretch cycle on the gastrocnemius. That stretch shortened over the hamstring. That stretch shortens over the glute. So her right leg right now is doing less work than the left one. And we're doing that on purpose, okay? Oops, go back. All right, here we go. So as we continue with this, she's got her foot on the floor and she gets like a pretty decent stretch on that left leg. Now, if I want the left leg to get more stretch and I want the right leg to do less work, we can elevate that back foot. And what we just did was we put that right hamstring and right gastroc and right glute on greater stretch by elevating, flexing her up more. But because her foot is higher, when she hinges, she can actually prop her butt up higher and get more of a left hamstring stretch, left glute stretch because of that prop. And as we continue to work on this and we progress her, she can eventually put her foot up against the wall and really shorten that hamstring so the right hamstring is hardly doing anything. Her left leg's pretty much doing all of it. Now, the next step to that would be to simply extend that right leg. She would move away from the wall. She would extend that right leg behind her and she'd be doing a single leg RDL at this point. But we don't want balance to be an issue when we're trying to work on range of motion and strength at the same time. So we give the kickstand, we give the foot. What does a kickstand do for your bike? You don't have to balance when you're standing on it. The kickstand's holding you balanced. So now you can just sit there, don't do anything else. I can just focus on whatever the other goals are, but the kickstand keeps me in position and balances me. So now she can just move and hinge and focus on heavier load and a greater range of motion. And if she has any imbalance from one leg to the other, which as a javelin thrower who threw right-handed, who blocked her left leg over and over hundreds of thousands of times, over and over again, softball for years, hundreds of thousands of times before that, the exact same pattern, step, step, throw, left leg, over and over. The left hamstring got very tight, her left hip flexor got very tight, and her right hip got very pliable, same with that right hamstring. And so when you do that a billion times in one direction and you try to do it the other way, you're not nearly as pliable. You're exceptional on one side and you're not so exceptional on the other in terms of achieving flexibility, range of motion, stability, power, ballistics, all that. So when we do these, it's a great way for us to look and go, okay, left hamstring, this much flexibility and this much strength. Right, boy, we got to catch up on the right, improving flexibility and in strength. And eventually we get both of those pretty close to each other and then both can start to increase together. But what you don't want to do is keep training the strong flexible side higher and higher and higher and the not so strong side higher and higher. If they're already 30% difference and you get them both 30% better, you're still 30% difference. Like it didn't get any better. You just made the overall performance better, but the gap still exists. So that's where lifts like this, these single leggers, really start to do a lot of good for us as we progress. Next one, we talked about those abductors, the glute medius and minimus. So we're going to start by putting just a mini band at the top of the knees and doing some lateral steps. We're going to use this square to rectangle example as something that we want to feature every time you take a step. When her feet are all the way together and her feet are right under her hips, if you were to draw a line from ankle to ankle and then up from knee to knee and then across and get just four sides, you're in kind of a squared position. But then as you take that square and you step out further, now you're in kind of a rectangular position. And so we want to go from a square to a rectangle, square to a rectangle, square to a rectangle, every step that she takes as she progresses. Now we can put in a very, very light band at the ankle to produce more tension, more glute activation. And then just to get the rest of the posterior chain activated, we can give you a band around the hands, supinate those hands and no money, pull those apart. And now from basically the erectors of the spine, rhomboids, subscapularis, etc., all the way down her lower back, all the way to her glutes, to her hamstrings, to her gastroc, all the way down. That entire posterior chain is on while performing these lateral steps. Notice how her face changes from the 2 bands to adding the no money. I love this face change. Oh, I don't like this very much at all. She told me right away, she goes, this band's really, really tight. I said, just hold it. You can, you'll get some action in there. And the bicep starts to pop a little bit and the grin comes out. There it is. And so that's that rectangle to triangular position that we want to work through this band lateral slide. And the goal is probably like 10 by 10 by 10 by 10, or if you have more length, you could do 20 by 20 or whatever it is. About 100 of these a day will really produce some great results for the hips. Again, we're not really getting a lot of glute max out of this. You're getting a lot of glute medius and minimus, which is what we want to fill in those little gaps on the glutes. And then as we progress here, the forward leaning split squat. Regular old split squats look like so. Okay, we're allowing for some knee drift and we got a good vertical posture. Then we pre-hinge to preload the front glute and we work through that good range of motion. So let's take one more look here. A regular split squat as we come down. We want a 90 or near 90 degree angle flex in the front knee. I like to go a tiny bit shorter, which Keegan's in the perfect position for this because I want her front knee to drift. I want that front knee to drift forward, not so far that she has to get off her heel. But I do want a lot of knee drift going forward. That increases the flexibility of her Achilles and at the ankle, allowing her to stay very pliable at her ankle. There is the knees over toes guy. Again, I don't remember his real name, just he's knee over toe guy. And he does a lot of lunges where that front foot's way out and he's up on the toe and he's pushing the knee way beyond. I feel like that's way too much too soon, even really too much that you really don't need that in my opinion. But I do think that your knees can drift over your toes plenty. And we will do drills and we will do lifts where you'll squat down on your heels, go up to your toes and then stand up. And we'll typically do that with your hands on a post or grabbing a band or a rope so you can be supported while you do it. But at the same time, we're allowing for a fairly healthy, slow, progressive drift of the knees going forward. This is a great way to introduce that and start working through a range of motion where the knee starts to drift a little further than just staying in place. And that's a solid introduction to this. Now, when we get into the hinge position, what we want to do is pre-stretch the right glute. So that's why she's going to hinge into the position she's in now, which about 90 degrees at the hip compared to her leg where she's set up now. That preloaded hamstring, preloaded glute with load in hand. Now we're going to be 2 stretched rubber bands that as she goes down into a deep range of motion can increase, but because they're taut, we're giving more emphasis onto these musculatures. So this is going to give you a very glute dominant split squat versus a very quad dominant split squat. But notice the back position, how straight it is the entire time. When she goes all the way down, she's still in that good 90 degree hinge. And when she comes all the way up, she's staying in that 90 degree hinge, allowing the glute and the ham to do the work underneath. You would then, obviously switch, get both sides and feel which one's a little stronger, weaker, etc. But that's going to be our target for these areas as we work our way through developing that glute strength. So as we move in here to some Q&A, and if there are any that are popping up, feel free to, you have any questions or comments? We have nothing on there? Okay. As we go through this, I'm happy to discuss, but a couple of things I want you to keep in mind when targeting your glutes. Something to focus on with the glute in particular is, am I good at hinging from the hip in a horizontal position before a vertical position? So typically, if people are really weak in their hamstrings or their glutes or in their lower back, and you start to teach them hinges, they don't have the strength. They don't have the hamstring strength or the glute strength or the lower back strength to hold them in a good position to where they can work all the way through that range of motion without compromising their lower back or their hip. So if we take them from that standing hinging position and we put them onto the floor and allow them to practice hinging, but in that horizontal position, the vertical loading, the axial loading around the spine is quite minimal. The range of motion can be controlled with feet on the floor and then feet elevated up onto a 6-inch box and then eventually a 12-inch box. And so we can increase range of motion at the hip We can get bands around the knees. We can get bands over the hips like a seat belt. Would you set up for a band abduction, band around the knees, and one of the orange seat belts over your lap, pretty please? Thank you, my love. I'm gonna have her perform a couple of those behind us here, and then maybe bring an orange box over for you to elevate your feet up onto. Thanks, love. And if we can get good at hip hinging in that horizontal position and develop a lot of glute and hamstring strength, and then increase that range of motion and start to develop from there, that's gonna carry over big time, not only to how well you squat, but also how well you hinge vertically. From the vertical position, we want you to do some either partially assisted stability training, holding like a stick, or a band hinges, and that's gonna deload your body but allow for the range of motion still to occur. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of these with Keeg. Let's start off with you just flat on the floor here, babe. And go ahead and throw your blue band on just above the knees. And yeah, you're in a good spot there. So the abductors are gonna turn on because she's gonna have this band on just above the knee. And then flat on the back, we're gonna tuck the shoulder blades together. I like going in this supinated position with the palms, so it helps you tuck your shoulder blades together. And then from there, if you want to turn your hands over, you can, or you can just leave them. I always kind of do mine palm up because you're gonna be holding this in a minute. So if she goes knees together right now, abductors are not on. If she were to bridge up and down right now, she would get some hamstring, but mostly quad because of the position that we're in. So we're gonna have her push the knees apart, abductors are on. Then she's gonna lift her toes up off the deck, move your feet forward, yeah, just a hair, perfect. Now the toes are up off the deck and she's gonna pull her heels down and back into the floor. And when she does that really, really hard, her gastroc is gonna activate, look at that, it got hard. Her hamstrings are gonna get hard, and she's going to pull herself up into the bridge position. If you do 4, 5, 6 of these, go ahead and keep going. And as you're going, you're like, man, my quads are really burning. You're doing it wrong. It means you're pushing into the up position. You're not pulling into the up position. So that's what we want to do, is pull up there to where you feel all of this. You can see those hamstrings engaging every time she pulls herself into that up position. So now we're going to give her a little more tension. She's going to hold this guy around her hands, belt over. We just call this a little seat belt. Okay, so she's gonna tuck in, shoulder blades good. And as she pulls up, her arms are pinning her down. She's gotta overcome the band. So now the entire posterior chain is on. The lats, the rhomboids, the triceps, like the whole backside of her body is on. Pretty much everything's active here other than her pecs, other than in a antagonistically way to engage around the shoulders. She's getting a really good posterior chain. Now we're gonna just throw the book at her, and we're gonna put her elevated. Now watch, so much more flexion here, right? We're at a full 90 now. So when she comes up, we've got a big range of motion, probably 20, 30 degrees more. And she's got a much tighter band that she has to overcome coming up out of this. You are so much better at this than I am. This is really, really good. You feeling those glutes? Feeling those hamstrings? Okay, good. So that's all the right positions that we want to be in. Come on up here. Great job, my love. You're so flexible too. I would have just buckled in half, someone trying to pick me up like that. So that gives you a really good starting point. Some of the cues, some of the key things that you want to talk about or discuss or use with your clients when we do this is showcasing that glute strength development. You can do bands around the knees and do like kickbacks, donkey kicks, abduction, fire hydrants, all those kinds of things. I think those are fine and they will get your hips and glutes stronger, but I think you get a better range of motion return with this, and it's more applicable to that split squat that we just talked about, to step ups that you would eventually build up to the kickstand RDLs, because it is number one sagittal, and because of the range of motion occurring with that band tension, those abductor band tensions pushing apart, you're going to get more recruitment out of that as you come up. When you do one leg and then the other, yes, you're unilaterally targeting each of those glutes, but just because each one can independently do that, it doesn't mean they can't both bilaterally do it at the same time with as much force or as much tension. And so that's kind of a unique approach that we would want to take. It's like those individual fire hydrant-esque types of lifts all work really well. But the greatest returns have come from hip thrusting, from squatting, from deadlifting. And those are those big bilateral lifts that develop two really evenly, muscular strength, powerful based glutes. And that ultimately is going to help your back quite a bit.
Which one's your phone?
Yeah, my phone?
Yeah.
You got it. All right, team. Well, I think that's it on my end, content-wise. Do we have any comments on the YouTube? No questions, no comments?
None yet.
Okay.
I asked
Well, feel free to post any if you have. And if not, go ahead, babe.
Well, I asked on social.
Did we have any questions on there?
And if there's any on there. And I hadn't received any yet, but thought that we could just duel this up here.
Well, this is interesting.
Yeah, and say, open this up, since I didn't have everybody on there. There's anybody joining us live on Instagram now to throw out a quick Q&A. So if you guys we're just finished up our YouTube live stream, if you're just joining us now on Instagram. And so it's our Q&A section. So we wanted to...
Instagram, Instagram.
So
nice to meet you.
To open up our live Q&A section to those on Instagram as well as that are watching right now on YouTube. So fire away if anybody has anything. I had a question to try and kick us off and start it. In the forward-leaning hinge with that in our looking at our glute development, is there any change in somebody who has kyphosis or one of those back spine things that you're going to adapt differently in those? Is it still okay for them to lean forward?
Oh, yeah.
They already have that excessive, and how would you maybe navigate something like that?
So that brings up a really good question just to start, but I promise I'll get to your question. Do you want to load people that have kyphosis? And this was a really interesting debate that I saw our guy from the, I'm blanking on his name. It'll come to me. Dustin Jones. I saw Dustin Jones and another gentleman have this debate on should you, kyphotic clients, kyphosis is that forward tilt, forward head fused kind of position. When people turn to look, their heads are kind of stuck in that position. Should you load folks like that or not? And Dustin was like 100%, lift them as hard as they can. And another physical therapist, I don't remember his name. He lost the debate, so that's why I don't remember his name. I'm kidding. I just don't remember it. Because I went up and befriended Dustin immediately, and I was like, you and I are speaking the same language here, man. We should be buddies. And so the debate kind of came down to, well, I think that if you're going to load people with that much kyphosis, that you could possibly cause more damage and harm, and it's not necessarily going to improve them. And his comment back was, they've had 70 years of basically pulling themselves forward into that position, and their bones are so soft that their body has given to that position that really the only thing left to do is to try to densen the bones and try to make the best out of this that you have left. At this point, you cannot correctively exercise someone out of that. If they were 40 or 50, then maybe. If we had 20 or 30 years, but in the 70s, early 80s, you give people the much strength and much power production as you can. So you hex bar deadlift them, and you goblet squat them, and you rack pull them, and you swing them, and you do whatever lifts they can to get them as strong as possible in that kyphotic position, and you hope for the best, really, at that point. And I think that's a good opportunity for us to kind of look at that and go, all right, is this client, quote unquote, rescuable at this point, and should we load them? And I think the answer is always yes. I mean, they're very, very, very few, unless they have like a fresh fracture, they just fell, like a current injury. But if they are just simply kyphotic, no, I think you load them and you get the bone density response, you get the anti-sarcopenic response, you get them strong, you get them powerful, because all of that is going to be fall prevention type stuff, which is much more important than trying to bring their head or neck back 2 or 3 inches. That's not fixable at 70, 75 years old. I'm not trying to crush dreams. I'm just being real. Okay, the average person lives to about 77 years old. So if you're 73, 74, 75, I've got 4 or 5 years on average to try to do with you as best I can. And the best that I can do is help keep you off the ground, help keep you from falling, because I know that's going to kill you faster than your kyphotic neck, right? So to answer the question, is it good or bad to, even with individuals that have kyphosis, to have them in forward-leaning hinges, pin positions, forward-leaning split squat positions, forward-leaning step-up positions? Absolutely. Because the stronger I get their butt, their hamstrings, their lower back, the better they're going to be at staying on their feet. And that, for pretty much everybody after age 65, 70, is our greatest concern. Because if they fall down, the potential of a catastrophic break, the femur, the femoral neck, the pelvis, the clavicle. If any of those, and you could throw the humerus in there as well, upper humeral aspect. If any of those areas get snapped, broken, compound fracture, etc., quality of life is absolutely out at that point. Very rarely do people rebuild and grow back to the same function they had, let alone better. And so you might hear that and be like, the clavicle? Yeah, that individual more than likely will never raise their arm over their head again. And the fact that we did that with Joyce was borderline a miracle, because every other client I've had a chance to do that with, we didn't get there. So these are greater concerns than the kyphotic position. And these lifts help you develop that musculature. And in that forward tilt position is often 47% of our falls occur in that direction, 41% behind you. And so if you're good at stepping forward and stepping back and adjusting your posture to those positions as we go, you're going to be much more defensible to the fall, because 84%, whatever that adds up to, you're 80 something percent of your falls are going to occur there. Now the other 17 to 20%, whatever it is, occur in any combination of everything else in between. And that's where our lateral lunges, lateral steps, lateral push-offs, curtsy lunges, all those things come in to help us across the board. That was an extremely long answer to one question, but I think we got a couple of things answered there in one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just wanted to remind everybody joining us on Instagram that we just finished up our YouTube live stream, and we're doing a live Q&A, so throw them in there if you have anything. My other question is, with the same type of back issues and postural issues, is there anything different you do for them while they're laying on the ground, because they're going to have such a big change?
Another great question. Yeah, the laying position, let me open this so you guys can see us a little bit better. Anybody online, you got questions, type them in. We're happy to answer. The supine position, lying on the floor position, you'll see kyphotic individuals, they can't put their head on the ground. Like they'll be 3, 4, 5 inches from putting their head down, and you'll see they're trying, their face hurts so much, they're trying to let their head sit down. They physically can't do it. And so to ask them to lay there, they are muscularly holding their head in the position that they're in. They can't just relax and set it on the ground. So you want to put something under their head to help them out. Here's another key component to that. It could be multiple towels. It could be like a Airex pad and then a towel or 2 or 3. Figure out what kind of support they need that will assist. And then as they bridge or do a pullover or do any other exercise, as they're doing it, you can encourage them to retract their chin in and try to pull into the towel or into the pillow or whatever you're using. And that will assist in some retraction strength in the neck. If anything, it just helps build some strength around the neck as they do it. So I think that gives them support, number one. It allows them to practice being down on the ground and getting back up, which is super important. Because a lot of people, we just saw it with one of our clients apparently today, was not on our workout and found out that she fell in the garden. She didn't break anything, but she got herself back up and was able to go inside, and she's banged up, but she's not hurt, okay? And that right there shows us client is capable of getting down and up and off the floor, which is good, but we've practiced that so many times with her. So when the moment came where she fell, and you know, inevitably we don't want people to fall down, but if they do, we want them to survive the fall. So if they fall, they don't break anything, they just get some bangs and bruises and hurt ego and whatnot. And then they are capable of getting themselves up off the ground and getting back to doing what it is they were doing prior to. Because what we don't want them to have is catastrophic break and now they're stuck there. And if they live by themselves or if no one knows where they're at, then that could be the end. To be honest, look at Gene Hackman. That's a very good example, right? I mean, could not get himself off the ground and unfortunately died in that position. And so these are terrible circumstances that we're dealing with individuals that have sarcopenic bodies that don't allow them to be terribly stable on their feet. But those are all things that we can re-engineer as they get stronger and improve their stability. Their gait will increase, their posture will improve across the board the stronger we get them, specifically on the backside of their body. And by laying down on the ground, practicing bridging, practicing pullovers, practicing those angles, practicing getting up and down off the ground, we're really aiding them in all those, but we're also building confidence that they can get up and down off the ground. Because a lot of our clients haven't for years when they come in here for the first time. So I think there's a lot of good, more than we think, of just let's make your neck comfortable while you're in that position. Like there's a lot more to come out of that. when you're on the floor in the supine position. And if you have individuals that can't get there, grab a couple plyo boxes, a couple 18 inchers or a couple 12 inchers, and slide them together and make them a bench they can sit down on, lay down on, do exercises and get back up. And you can slowly start to build those down as people get more strength established.
Yeah, awesome. And since I haven't seen any questions pop up there yet, but since we in the live stream talked about our glute development, is there ever a concern of if your glute having too much like lopsided balance, so not focusing enough on the front because we're focusing so much on the posterior? Is there any fear of that taking over and pulling your spine in the wrong direction?
Not really. I think we could probably spend most of our days exercising the posterior chain and still not build up enough posterior strength to equal the front side. Our entire life happens in front of us. Everything is sagittal for the most part. Everything is happening in front of us. So our hip flexors, our quads, our abs, our biceps, our pecs, all the muscles you can see are typically trained and engaged more than the ones that you can't see. So if you're going to give me 90 minutes, 3.5 hours a week or 2 hours or whatever, and I'm going to try to address all those muscles and the ones that are on the backside, I really want to emphasize the posterior chain more. I don't want to not train everything, but I really want to emphasize the backside of the body more to try to get it stronger to where I would just guesstimate people are 70% strength on the front, 30% on the back. Deconditioned individuals, like people that don't train, and ones that do are probably 60-40. So the potential to get them to 50-50 is really, really difficult. And if you do get there, it's pretty amazing. I've seen very few athletes that can squat to parallel and get back up, which almost everybody can do that. But very few that can get into the Nordic hamstring and tilt their entire body all the way down, touch their nose to the floor, and pull themselves back up, which showcases that you can quad extend your body weight, but you can't hamstring curl your body weight, right? And that Nordic hamstring is just a real testament to like extremely good hamstring development. I'm not saying everybody needs to be able to do that. I'm just saying like that's one way to look at somebody and be like, they're pretty damn even, right, on those two. Now, if you could like front squat your body weight and RDL your body weight, is that equal? Well, you got angles of pull, everything's kind of different. I don't really know if there's anything else you could compare it to. I just know that you would want to be able to focus the majority of your time on the posterior chain because that's where I think the most improvement will be had.
I only have one more question.
Fire away.
Out of the Maximus, Minimus, and Medius, which is your favorite?
The Maximus, yours in particular. All of your Maximuses are all pretty nice. So yeah, I like them all. I like them all. That's a great question. That's a good one to end on. You're a little rosy. I love you. All right. I am going to send this back over to you so you can wrap that guy up. And everybody on YouTube at home, thank you all for being here. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. And hopefully you'll join us next week. TOA Select members only next week. We will see you same bat time, same bat channel. And for YouTube and maybe even Instagram, we will see you all the week after because we'll be back.
Thank you, Cody. Just keep typing.
What do we got?
Keep typing. They're retyping.
Okay, they're retyping. All right, we're signing off with all of you. We will talk to you all later. Thank you, YouTube. And we'll see you in 2 weeks, YouTube. Take care.